remember falling asleep and waking up the week before. I repeated an entire week, and I have no idea what happened. Ever since, I've believed that we're in some form of the Matrix or something. I was 20, staying with my husband's friends in West Palm Beach, Florida. In the middle of the night, my husband screamed. I opened my eyes, and there was a dark figure of a man standing at the foot of the bed. He stood at my husband's feet. I screamed and leapt out of the bed, hitting the wall light switch. The figure was gone, and our friends were banging on the door. It was very strange that we both saw the exact same thing. One time I was 6, and you might call it kid's imagination or whatever, but I was in a room with the blanket on the floor, and being 6, I go in that blanket. When I get in, I felt as if I got into a maze. Suddenly, there was like 3 curves of this blanket world that looked like exits. I kept crawling through one of them, and the cycle would just repeat and repeat like 5 times. I got out by pulling the blanket up, but when I tried to get in the blanket world again, it didn't work. It just became a normal blanket. Top regret is not continuing the blanket maze. Home alone one day with my dog and 2 of my friends' dogs. Out of nowhere, they all start barking and looking up towards our loft. As they're quieting down, I hear someone in a mocking, calm tone say, "Bark." They start going crazy again, and I decide it's time for a long evening walk. About 10 years ago, my mom was on vacation, and I drove the hour to her house and stayed over one night so I could take care of the place and do a few chores while she was gone. She had moved into the place about 2 years before, and I had never stayed the night there before. I was the only one in the house, so I made dinner, watched TV, and went to bed. Totally normal stuff. I should note here that my mom is a huge clutter junkie. She has knickknacks out the wazoo covering every surface in her house. Anyway, when I woke up in the morning, everything from the mantle over her living room fireplace, probably 24 knickknacks, was on the floor arranged in a perfect circle. I was so effing confused. I felt funny about telling anyone about it, but I called my mom and told her, and she said that it had happened occasionally ever since she moved in, but had never really told anyone. She said it happened in different rooms sometimes, but it was always just a playful rearrangement of stuff. She said she called it teaser. The fact that she had a name for it creeped me out. She still lives in the house, but reports that over the years it started slowing down and now doesn't happen anymore. Yesterday, my husband texted me to tell me he'd paid for my car service. I texted back, how bad was the damage? Like, how much did it cost? About an hour later, I opened a notebook on my desk that I hadn't touched all day. Written on the first page, then erased, but still clearly visible, was, how bad was the damage? I 100% didn't write this. I hadn't opened the notebook yet yesterday. Actually, I hadn't opened that page all week. It absolutely creeped me out. I haven't stopped thinking about it since. I was walking to my friend's house one summer, maybe 10 or 11 years old. Anyways, sunny day, couple clouds, but otherwise it's bright out, perfect visibility, when a perfectly rectangular shadow comes up from the direction behind me on the ground, maybe 15 feet by 30 feet in size, traveling just faster than a car probably would be, and goes over the top of me. I'm looking at the shape on the ground as it goes over, and when I do look up to the sky, I don't see anything that could have possibly cast it. Even the clouds were just trailing little wisps. I looked back down, and it was going over some houses, and then it was gone forever. A friend and I were driving in the late evening on a country road when 5 cooked spaghetti noodles hit the windshield. I have no explanation for it. I was camping with my sister and my father up near Sequoia, and we decided to take a long hike up the mountain. About 3 miles away from the campground, we heard very loud elevator music all of a sudden. We looked around the whole area and even yelled out, but we got no response. Eventually, we just left. But the weird thing was, it didn't fade out with distance as we were walking away. It just stopped, unexplained to this day. My family was sitting on the back porch watching a thunderstorm. My older brother grabbed a toy gun out of my hand and said, "Watch this." He pointed the gun at a tree in the backyard and pulled the trigger. As the toy gun popped, lightning struck the tree he was aiming at, and the tree fell over. He handed me the toy gun back with a smile and walked away. My parents witnessed this event as well. It was one hell of a coincidence, but damn was his smile creepy, like he knew it was going to happen. Found out a few months ago that my parents' friend that was deaf and consistently visited us when I was very young didn't exist. They didn't have a deaf friend. It might seem like I had an imaginary friend and that would be the end of it, but the memory of him not being able to hear and learning how to speak a bit with my hands is the first time I had any concept of deafness at all, and the first time I learned a bit of sign language. I don't know how I learned what I did from this person that supposedly never existed. How did I imagine up a knowledge of deafness and the ability to sign from someone that existed only in my head? In my shared office at work, we had a huge filing cabinet that was by the door. It was extremely heavy, and I don't think it could be moved by less than 3 strong adults. One day I came off lunch break and needed to get some stuff from the office. The door wouldn't open, and I realized the filing cabinet had moved and was up against the door. Ended up taking us an hour or so to figure out how to push it back into place so we could actually get into the office. Weird. And it never happened again. My boyfriend and I moved into a new apartment a few weeks ago. Not too long ago, he got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom and left the door open a crack. After a few minutes, I looked up and saw him staring at me through the open door, smiling. I told him that he was being creepy and to knock it off. Then I heard the toilet flush, and he walked out of the bathroom. No one else was home. I was helping my mom clean out her garage, and we ended up coming across this old teddy bear that belonged to my great-grandma. She told me to take it down to the dumpster at the end of our street and throw it away, so I did. Later that night, we were digging through the garage a little more to try and get something out, and there it was, the teddy bear that I had thrown away earlier that day. Neither me nor my mom knew how it got back there, or why it was back there. Driving down a dark highway in Alabama with my fiance when 2 white orbs, about 3 to 5 inches in diameter, came through the upper right side of my windshield and out through the roof. I thought I lost my mind, but he looked equally as shocked as I did, and he described the exact same thing. We were still in a bit of a shock a couple minutes later when we came upon an SUV flipped upside down. A lone police officer waved us around the wreck. No one was in the car. We guessed the EMTs already came. We can't shake the feeling that maybe the 2 orbs were the 2 people that died in the accident. When I was in 3rd grade, one of my best friends drowned after her mom drove through a high water crossing. She drowned on a Saturday, but on both Thursday and Friday night, I had dreamed that we were swimming in my pool, and a hole just opened up under her and pulled her under the water where I couldn't get her. I even told her at school on Friday that I had dreamed she drowned. At the funeral, her mom gave me a few things of hers, including a journal that she wrote in every day because she had written a lot about us. Her last entry was that I had told her about my dream of her drowning. I remember having a younger brother. I remember waiting back after school got over so we could leave at the same time. I remember my dad taking us out to watch Wall-E. I remember having a lot of memories with him. Turns out, my brother never existed. My parents don't remember him. My friends don't remember him. All the pictures I took with him are gone. Turns out, I just had an imaginary friend. A few months ago, I was outside after dark taking out the trash. I decided to go ahead and have a quick smoke when it happened. The gravel on my driveway started to jump vertically like 4 to 8 inches high off the ground. This continued for a solid 30 seconds before I saw something leap from a treetop and disappear into thin air. At a fancy restaurant in town in the women's washroom, there were only 2 stalls. I'm in one stall finishing up when I hear high heels clang into the stall beside me. I think nothing of it until I come out and see the stall door wide open with no one inside. I shrug it off as nothing until I am washing my hands, and as I am drying them off on a paper towel, I hear this from the said stall in a whisper. "Who's there?" I go wide-eyed, throw my paper towel, and get the F out. Needless to say, I try to avoid that bathroom now. My great-grandmother was talking in her sleep, or so I thought. I went into her room, and there was a butt print on top of the covers. She was angry and said, "You made him leave." She even remembered it the next day. I still don't know who she was talking to or why they left a butt print. I didn't think ghosts did that. When I was young and had just begun taking showers on my own, I very specifically remember turning on the shower and the water coming out blood red. It remained that way for about 5 seconds before returning to normal, so I never told my parents about it. It wasn't rusty pipes, it was darker and thicker than that. Plus, that shower had been used many times before. Several years back, I was talking to my parents late at night. Their room leads to a corridor which has a door to the bathroom and a door for my room. I said goodnight to both of them, and they responded each with goodnight. Then I proceeded to close the door to their room and walk the corridor to mine. When I was by the bathroom door, a voice whispered in my ear, "Good night," with the deepest, raspiest, and spookiest voice I have ever heard. I froze for a second, opened the door to my parents again, and asked if they had spoken to me. They both denied it, so I calmly closed the door and then bolted to my room and cried myself to sleep. Right here at work a few nights ago during night shift, I was typing up an email to a customer and saw something out of the corner of my eye. I ignored it for a moment and kept working. Then it sunk in. It was a fucking person just staring at me through the window. As I turned my head, they slowly walked out of my view toward the parking lot. So I hauled ass outside to confront them, and they were gone. Not a soul in sight for miles. I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched the rest of the night. We took my daughter to Cape Cod when she was 3. She had never been to the ocean before. When we got to the beach, she said, "Oh, the ocean. This is where I used to come before I knew Mommy and Daddy." After my cat of 10 years died in December, I would hear him meowing. Usually I could just pass it off as thinking too much about him. We used to have a thing where we'd talk back and forth to each other. He'd meow and I'd call back, "Clyde." He'd call again, I'd say, "Clyde." Then he'd run up to me and we'd cuddle. One day I walked outside and I heard him as if he were sitting 10 feet away. Following right after, I heard my own voice calling from far off, "Clyde." The meow and my voice repeated a few more times. It was extremely nerve-wracking. When it stopped, I just turned around and went back inside. I don't hear him meowing much anymore. I was alone in the house. I decided to adjust the temperature on my water heater. I sat down in front of the water heater and removed the gray plate covering the thermostat. This plate is metal and about half the size of a sheet of copy paper. I set the plate down next to me and adjust the thermostat. I go to put the metal plate back on. It is gone. I never saw that metal plate again. There is literally nowhere it could have gone, but it did. Walking through my house at night on my way to bed, I turned the kitchen light off, then opened the door to go upstairs into a pitch black room. took a step into the room and stumbled back and felt like I'd walked into something, like a big piece of material. I immediately smacked the light switch on, and there was nothing there. Ran up the stairs, leaving all the lights on overnight. Once, while falling asleep after a movie with the family, I was awoken by what seemed like a small boy running toward the couch we were in. I immediately sat up and braced for impact. Now, I would normally chalk it up to falling asleep, but my mom and dad also bolted awake at the same time. Before I could explain, my dad told me he saw a boy running toward us. His description of the boy matched mine, while my mother confirmed as well. When I was like 12, I was walking down the hallway of my home. There's a closet that I walk past, and the door is sometimes open. Anyway, I walk past the door one day and see someone standing behind the clothes. I could see feet standing on the floor behind some stuff that was hanging. My family was home, and my assumption was that one of my sisters was trying to scare me. I called my older sister's name, and then my younger sister's name, but they said nothing. Finally, I moved the clothes to see who it was, and nothing was there. I was camping in the wild up in the mountains, a night as dark as it can be. The water had just boiled in the fire, and when I was about to take it, a rider appeared, almost like he materialized there. His clothes were even darker than the night. He came close to the fire, and I saw his face. An old, tired, tough man. He asked for water. "I'm thirsty," he said. Scared as hell, I offered him some fresh water that I had inside the tent, but he said, "No need, this will do." And I swear to God that he took the kettle out of the fire barehanded and drank all the boiling water in one go. When he was finished, he looked at me and said, "Thanks a lot," and left. I was putting my son to sleep one night, sitting in his room and singing to him in the rocking chair. I heard someone blowing us kisses over the monitor. I thought it was my husband, as the monitor had a feature where you could use the handheld part to talk through the camera. Came out and told my husband how cute he was. Turns out, it wasn't him. I fell asleep at my desk at work one day. I must have been very sleepy because I passed out quick. While asleep, I saw my 9-year-old nephew jumping on the sofa at my sister's place. He saw me watching him, stopped, and had this look of utter shock on his face. After that, I instantly woke up feeling strange and disoriented. It felt real. Later that day, I visit some of my family at my sister's place. My nephew comes running up to me, saying that he saw a ghost while he was playing on the sofa earlier. My jaw dropped. I haven't told anyone this. They wouldn't believe me. Only my nephew and I know about it. I wonder if I astral projected. My friend is a twin, and they used to sleep in the same room up until their late teen years. One night when they were both sleeping in their bunks, my friend heard her sister calling her name. She responded groggily, asking what she wanted. Her sister, in a small voice, said, "There's someone sitting on the dresser staring at me." My friend thinks her sister is pulling a prank or had a nightmare, so she tells her to shut up and rolls over. A few moments later, she felt someone crawl into bed with her. Thinking it was her sister, she rolled over to tell her to go back to her bed, only to be met with nothing. Her sister was still in her top bunk. When my son was about 2 or 3, he wouldn't go to sleep, so I let him in my bed. My husband was asleep, so I told my boy he had to look at his books quietly while I read mine. He was good for a bit, but then he started reading the book, actually reading the words out loud, slowly. He couldn't read, and it was a newer book we hadn't read to him yet. It wasn't memorization. I asked him how he knew what it said, and he replied, "My friend John is telling me." Scared the shit out of me.